How did we get here? To a world of nations with defined borders and big central governments. It wasn't some slow, gradual process. No, it was forged in fire. A really chaotic revolutionary period between the 15th and 17th centuries that just completely redrew the map and redefined what a state even is. We're going to break down exactly how that happened.
Okay, so our story really starts with this incredible transformation. Just look at the difference here. On the left, that's feudal Europe. It's a messy, colorful quilt of territories. Your loyalty wasn't to a country, it was to some local lord. Borders were blurry, power was all over the place. But then, look to the right. Something new is taking shape. We're starting to see modern nations, these consolidated kingdoms with actual, firm borders and a single source of power. This was way more than just changing lines on a map. It was a revolution in how power itself worked.
So how did this all go down? Well, it wasn't just one thing. We're going to tackle this by looking at 5 massive interconnected changes. How a new order was born from total chaos, how the human mind basically reawakened, the discovery of a whole new world, a collision of faith and power that split a continent, and finally, how all of these powerful forces came together to forge the modern state we live in today.
So where do we even begin? You might think it started with some grand plan, but nope. The birth of the modern state actually starts with an ending, the total, catastrophic collapse of the old feudal system. The old world literally had to fall apart before something new could rise up from the ashes.
The late Middle Ages? I mean, it was practically an apocalypse. You had widespread famine, but the real knockout punch was the Black Death. It wiped out up to half of Europe's population. It just shattered the very foundation of the feudal system, which was built on peasant labor. Suddenly, there weren't enough people to work the land, and the power of all those local lords just crumbled. And right into that power vacuum stepped these ambitious kings and queens who saw a golden opportunity to centralize power like never before, sometimes through deals, but let's be honest, mostly through war.
And here's the wild part. This wasn't just happening in one kingdom. As you can see here, this new type of ruler was popping up all across the continent. You can think of them as the architects of our modern world. The Valois in France, the Tudors in England, they all had the same big idea. They weren't satisfied with being the most powerful lord among many. They wanted to be the only source of power in a single unified kingdom. But look, all this political change couldn't have happened on its own. It needed a whole new way of thinking about the world and our place in it. There was a genuine revolution of the mind happening, and it would become the intellectual fuel for pretty much every other change that was coming.
The spark that lit the fuse actually came from the East. In 1453, the ancient city of Constantinople fell. Scholars fled, and they brought with them a treasure trove of lost knowledge, the philosophy, the science, and the art of ancient Greece and Rome. This stuff had been locked away from Western Europe for centuries, and when it flooded into places like Florence, it changed everything.
This wave of ancient ideas triggered this huge mental shift. The medieval mind was totally God-centered, theocentric. Your life on Earth, it was just a test, a warm-up for the afterlife. But the Renaissance just flipped that script completely. It pushed for anthropocentrism, a worldview that put humanity, you, me, right at the center. It celebrated this life, human genius, and all the potential of the human mind.
And this one idea, anthropocentrism, was absolute dynamite. By putting human beings at the center of everything, it basically gave people permission to be curious again, to ask questions, to create things. It just unleashed this torrent of innovation and this burning desire to figure out how the world worked, not just through faith, but through your own eyes and your own reason.
And ground zero for this explosion of creativity was Florence. It became like a new Athens, producing absolute giants like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. And these guys weren't just artists, they were the embodiment of this new ideal. They were pushing the boundaries of what anyone thought was possible in art, science, and engineering, all at the same time.
But this new way of thinking, this new confidence, wasn't just going to stay in art studios and libraries. No way. It was about to take aim at the heavens themselves and challenge a belief that had stood solid for nearly 5,000 years.
Then this Polish astronomer Nicholas Copernicus comes along and drops an intellectual bombshell. He proposes the heliocentric model, suggesting that, get this, the Earth isn't the center of creation. It's just another planet zipping around the sun. It is so hard to overstate how completely radical this was. It wasn't just some new astronomy theory. It was a direct attack on religious doctrine and on humanity's special place in the universe.
And as you can imagine, this led to a really dramatic and frankly dangerous showdown
between science and authority. Galileo Galilei, who was a huge champion of Copernicus's ideas, was put on trial by the Inquisition. He was forced to publicly deny that the Earth moves. This legendary quote, though, it just captures the whole defiant spirit of a battle that would really define the modern hunt for knowledge.
So at the exact same time Europe's collective mind is expanding, the physical world itself was literally getting bigger. A new age of exploration was starting, and it wasn't just going to redraw the maps, it was going to change the course of human history on a global scale, forever.
1492. We all know the date, but it's so much more than just a year in a textbook. It's the exact moment when two completely separate streams of human history that have been flowing in total isolation from each other for thousands of years just violently crashed into one another.
You know, we often think about the conquest of the Americas in terms of guns, germs, and steel. And yeah, weapons played a part. But the real conqueror, the most devastating weapon of all, was totally invisible. European diseases like smallpox, which native populations had absolutely no immunity to, acted like a biological weapon of mass destruction. Entire civilizations were just decimated, sometimes before a single European soldier even showed up.
What happened next was one of the biggest transfers of wealth in all of human history. A literal river of gold and silver flowed from the Americas straight into Europe, and it bankrolled the ambitions of all those new monarchies. And at the same time, new foods like potatoes and corn completely changed the European diet, which led to a huge population boom. A truly global economy built on all of this was born.
So let's recap. The world is physically expanding, the human mind is expanding, and at the exact same moment, Europe's unified religious identity was about to be shattered from the inside out by our third great engine of change, the Protestant Reformation.
The spark this time was a crisis of faith. The Catholic Church was dealing with all these accusations of corruption, and the biggest symbol of that was the sale of indulgences, basically a get-out-of-purgatory free card. Well, a German monk named Martin Luther finally had enough. He nailed his 95 theses to a church door, directly challenging the Pope's authority. In any other time, that might have been the end of it, but because of the brand new technology of the printing press, Luther's ideas went viral. They spread like wildfire and ignited a revolution that would tear Christendom apart.
But the Reformation wasn't just about faith. It was also about money, and this part is fascinating. It created a completely new economic morality. Just look at the comparison here. The old Catholic view was often pretty suspicious of commerce. Charging interest on a loan was a sin. But the new Protestant ideas, especially from guys like John Calvin, they flipped that on its head. All of a sudden, hard work was seen as a way to worship God. And making a profit, that could be a sign that you were one of God's chosen.
What this created, basically, was a moral code that was consecrated to capital. This new Protestant work ethic, which really took hold in Northern Europe, it laid the ideological groundwork for modern capitalism. It suggested that being prosperous wasn't just okay, it could actually be a sign of divine grace.
Okay, so now we've got all our ingredients on the table. A political power vacuum, a revolution in how people think, a much bigger world to play in, and a whole new attitude about work and money. So let's see what happens when you throw all of that into the pot and stir. This is how the modern state gets forged.
The end result of all this revolutionary turmoil was a completely new kind of political machine. Unlike that old fragmented feudal system, the modern state was centralized. Power flowed from one person, the monarch. It was organized with a real bureaucracy and a professional army. And by creating peace and stability within its borders, it created the perfect environment for that new global economy to really take off and flourish.
In this new model, this centralized state, it would dominate Europe for centuries. It set the stage for everything that came next, from the Enlightenment all the way to the world we live in right now. Which of course leaves us with one last, really important question. If the state that we know was born from these huge revolutions in thought, territory, and faith, what forces are shaping the state of tomorrow?